And then we got the vegan fart issue,
Well, okay, let's talk about the vegan fart issue.
which we
This is
got to
something
talk
that you're
about.
very passionate about. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Better Basics podcast. I am Matt Stone, and as always, I have my best friend, Dylan Waldhuter. Dylan, what's going on, man? It's nice to see you.
You too, Matt. How you doing?
So, I'm doing great, man. Yeah, I'm excited for the show today. This was something that we've been talking about doing for a little while. The hot topics in the health world. So, uh, obviously, a lot of our followers are getting their their health advice directly from what they see and read on social media and in the news. So we thought that'd be a good idea to talk about some of those main topics and tell you what we feel about it, because obviously uh, the thing that you got to realize is that everybody's got an angle. There's always a spin. And it's just helpful to have some people that can kind of parse through what it all means and give you the important information without trying to scare you.
Yeah, this episode's going to come out on April 3rd. We're recording it on April 1st, which is April Fool's Day. And it's maybe a suitable day to be talking about headlines in the media that are prone to trick people. I've been tricked by them before. It's really easy to see these headlines that come through mass media and take them at face value. I've already been got a couple times today. I don't know if you saw in our group. And I got reverse got. So Russ had sent in our Snapchat text group that we were going to get 3 to 6 inches of snow.
Mm-hmm.
And I assumed it was an April Fool's joke.
Yeah, same.
So I told my colleague at work that it was an April Fool's joke and then realized that it was actually true.
Yeah, well, we'll
So
see. Who knows? Maybe this is Mother Nature's April Fool's joke. So
maybe it is.
We'll just see. But
yeah. So let's talk about some of these. There's been so much stuff in the media over the last, I don't know, 6 to 12 months. Everything from the Kellogg's CEO telling us that we're supposed to eat cornflakes for dinner to various articles demonizing protein to you name it. So we're going to go through some of these, talk at a high level about the truth behind a lot of them and why media is motivated to put out headlines that draw attention. I mean, obviously their whole business is eyeballs. So whatever they can say that's going to bring more attention to their publication is what they're going to print. And sometimes that is misleading. We'll call it misleading to some degree. So we want to talk about some of that. So let's start with this Kellogg's CEO. This was a few weeks back. He was on a TV show and he was talking about how households are paying more for food now than they have really in about 30 years time, right? With inflation and other things, the price of food has gotten more expensive. And through that context, he was making the case that cash-strapped households should consider eating cereal for dinner. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's important to understand the context of, where he was saying this. It was an interview on a business channel. I'm not sure exactly which one he was on, but it was, talking about the question was basically, with these soaring food prices and grocery prices, how the CEO of a food company feels about that. And he was happy. He was optimistic. Basically like, no, the poorer that people are, the better it is for cereal. And look, I love a bowl of cereal as much as the next guy. I grew up in a cereal household. All you name it. We had everything. We had Reese's Puffs. We had Rice Krispie treats. We had Frosted Cheerios. We were a standard cereal household, and I love it. I mean, I remember when we lived together, going to Woodman's and buying the discount bags of Captain Crunch that made the top of your mouth, bleed twice as fast as the name brand stuff. So I'm all for sneaking in a bowl of cereal every now and again, but I'm not putting it as a pillar of my healthy foods, even if I'm cash strapped.
Yeah, I mean, look, a CEO's job at the end of the day is to drive profits. And so, the price of food represents an opportunity for him to look to different marketing strategies to do so. And suggesting that something as inexpensive as cereal could be a good option for dinner makes a ton of sense on a business show for the CEO of a company to suggest that. I like cereal too. It's typically more of a snack slash dessert offering for me, although I will say Kellogg's now has a higher protein cereal on the market. Serving of it is 20 grams of protein. So I'll keep that in my pantry now, and when I need the convenience of a quick breakfast, a serving and a half of that, a cup of milk, and I've got 40 grams of protein in a bowl of cereal. I throw some all brand buds in there for some fiber. Is it as optimal as, something healthier, some eggs, some vegetables, some, healthy starches? Maybe not, but it's not something I'm having every day. And so I think if you want to sneak in a bowl of cereal because it's convenient or inexpensive, depending on where you're at financially, every once in a while, have at it. It's not the end of the world. The wellness space took up this headline and suggested everything from it being dangerous to our health to suggesting that the founder of Kellogg's was his whole ambition was to neuter the population. um, there's a prominent person in the wellness space that likes to wear orange sunglasses. I won't name him, but he went as far as to say that whole grains and cereals are out to neuter us. That
Right.
it's going to make us have less people on Earth. So, and actually, I saw Lane Norton made a post. There's studies that actually show the opposite of that. That cereals and whole grains specifically are actually associated with better fertility. So it's just easy to see how these headlines get thrown out there. They get picked up by various camps, and then they get twisted into different, outcomes to suit the narrative of whatever that person wants to promote or suggest.
Yeah. Okay. So cereal, good. We're pro cereal, but not. It shouldn't be a staple of your diet. Is that something we can both agree on?
Agreed.
A- And if you do find yourself, if you really enjoy cereal, look at some of those higher protein options. They make it more expensive for sure. So then you have to, if it's a budget constraint, that might make things a little bit tough, but that is an option if you just like it. So cereal, not inherently bad, but probably shouldn't be at the bottom of the food pyramid. The next thing that people are coming for, that science is coming for, Dylan, is diet soda. Now I'm not a soda drinker. I gave up soda. I mean, when I was a kid still, because I was an athlete and just knew that it wasn't something that I needed. I still enjoy it every now and again. Uh, over Easter. Oh, actually, let's take a little trip into Matt's cocktail corner here, because I was experimenting with a new cocktail that I discovered called the Batanga, which is tequila, lime juice, salt, and Mexican Coke. And you bet your ass that I enjoyed the hell out of that cocktail. I had a couple, was making it for family, and I wasn't too concerned about it. Now, it was Mexican Coke, so it's that pure cane sugar, and what we're talking about is diet soda, um, because of some of the potential heart risks that they're talking about.
Yeah. So there was two in the recent media that were picked up and pushed out with all sorts of different conclusions. The first, to your point, was about atrial fibrillation, so AF. And the headlines, I got one here, said diet drinks may boost risk of dangerous heart condition by 20%, study says. And so the study went on to suggest that about 2 liters of soda per day, of diet soda per day, increases your relative risk of this heart condition by 20%. And this is an important distinction. So when you see these studies and these headlines, oftentimes they're talking about relative risk. So that means the risk of having it versus not having it. But the absolute risk, right? The risk went from 4.6 from not having it to 5.1%. So it's a 0.5% increase in absolute risk, but 4.6 to 5.1% is a 20% increase.
Yeah.
So so think about that, right? Like the 20% is put in the headline, and that sounds scary. But if
Exactly.
you look at the absolute risk of 2 liters of diet soda per day, which is a lot, it's relatively insignificant.
Yeah, and again, that's not to say that you should be going out and drinking more diet soda. But if you're a diet soda drinker and you read this headline and it scared the shit out of you, well, chill out a little bit. Now, I think that there are plenty of benefits for curbing your soda consumption in general, or just not even necessarily sodas, just non-water beverages. They're just from a caloric intake perspective, from the sugar or whatever sweeteners that they're using. There are a bunch of reasons why it's probably beneficial to start to cut back on your soda consumption, but you're not necessarily 20% more likely to get atrial fibrillation if you are drinking some diet soda. Again, it's 2 liters a day, 7 days a week.
Right.
Which I know that there are people that do drink soda like that, but I would be interested to see what percentage of people that is actually affecting.
Yeah. The other point on the study front that's worth making when you see these really dramatic headlines is that oftentimes they're drawing causation out of correlative factors. So there's all these other confounding variables in a population that could lead to that increased risk of this atrial fibrillation heart condition. Everything from people who are more overweight being more likely to drink diet soda. Therefore,
Right.
it could be the overweightness, not the diet soda itself, that's leading to this increased condition. People that are, overweight are more likely to have diabetes, lower rates of physical activity, more likely to drink alcohol, etc. So all these confounding variables could be leading to that insignificant increase in absolute risk and that 20% relative risk that's being promoted by the media. So that you can really take this study and this headline with a grain of salt. And I think you're making really good points. If you're somebody who drinks 4 cans of regular Coke a day, and you're trying to figure out a way, we talk all the time, like nobody's asking you or suggesting that you even should be able to climb Everest overnight. But one little step you can take in that mountain is subbing out a regular Coke for a diet one, and you've decreased your calorie intake on a daily basis by 140, 150 calories. You change all
And
those
then
to Diet Coke, you're down 600. You start to wean yourself off from a can of Diet Coke a day till you're down to 1.
Right.
Now you've
It
cut
becomes a
600
stepping
Yeah.
stone. Yeah, and
Yes.
so we're like it's that is what gets lost with these studies, is that you're scaring people into not changing because they're
Right.
like, "Oh, well, why would I switch to diet stuff? That'll kill you." And it's like, "Well, wait a minute, why?" Like it depends, and it always depends, but that doesn't get clicks. So,
Yeah. The other
but
one,
yeah,
oh,
go
go ahead.
ahead. No, I
The
was ready. I'm moving on to the next one too.
So after they came for heart disease, they came at us with cancer. So the next one
Mhm.
was that diet soda aspartame, the artificial sweetener in diet soda, was carcinogenic. Headline was World Health Organization's Cancer Research Agency says aspartame sweetener a possible carcinogen.
Mhm.
And so the World Health Organization did give aspartame a classification of a 2B carcinogen. So now, if you look at the category of 2B carcinogens, it includes your mobile phone,
Yeah.
it includes pickled vegetables.
Right.
So people read this headline, oh shit,
Oh,
aspartame's
carcinogenic.
carcinogenic,
Holy
and
shit.
they're probably reading the headline on
On
their
a
phone.
phone. Yeah.
Um,
While eating a cheeseburger with pickles on it.
yeah. And then further,
Yeah.
they went on to state that 50 milligrams per kilogram of aspartame was safe. So what does that mean? That means a person who's 210 pounds could safely have 55 cans of diet soda per day. And that's not even accounting for the safety factors that they build into these studies that likely underpredict that number. You can
Right.
likely have much more than that safely. So
Yeah,
unless you're
well, no,
drinking
you but the thing
55,
is, well, okay, you can likely have that safely from a carcinogenic perspective.
exactly, right.
You're going to run
Yes.
into lots of other problems well before this gets carcinogenic.
Right.
And that's what's so funny about it is like, sure, this is an issue if you're if you're just mainlining this stuff. I mean,
Right.
come on.
Yeah, diet soda is unlikely to give you cancer. There's many other places you should be looking beyond diet soda. If you're a regular soda drinker and you're watching your weight and your calories,
Mhm.
making this shift to diet soda is probably a good intervention. Um, and if you enjoy regular soda and you're not watching your weight, having a soda here and there is not a problem. Is soda good for you? No.
No,
Is
no,
it
no.
going to cause heart disease and cancer when you consume it in moderate quantities? Absolutely not. So don't let these headlines scare you.
Yeah, exactly. And so, they can come after cereal all they want, Dylan. They can come after diet soda all they want, but they fucked up with this next one because now they're coming after protein, and that's something very near and dear to both of our hearts. But it's not surprising. This is a huge narrative in that we're seeing in the world today. That protein and then specifically animal-based proteins are dangerous. And you and I both can attest to the fact that one of the best things that we've done for ourselves as far as our diets are concerned is prioritizing protein.
Yeah, it was tough to see these headlines come out after we put out all this content
Yeah,
discussing how important it is to prioritize protein. So let's talk about a couple of them quick and where they really missed the boat. And I'll get into I have a master's in science, so I'll get into the science a little bit, but I'll try
perfect.
to keep it relatively high level. The first suggestion was that too much protein is going to damage your arteries. So the headline was, "You might be eating an artery damaging amount of protein," study warns.
Might be eating. Might be
You might be.
eating. You might be.
So
What?
they ran a couple follow-up studies, and what they were finding was that consuming protein activates an enzyme called mTOR, and
Hmm.
that crossing a certain threshold of protein could cause some increased level of this mTOR, in turn causing some harm in the body. So the first thing to note is the first study was 20 participants. So drawing conclusions off a study of 20 participants is nuts. Um, and the there was this. So the original studies were done on mice. These follow-on studies were done in humans. So 20 participants, and the study used Nestle's Boost product to increase protein in the study groups with this like protein shake. The protein shake has 24 grams of added sugar in it, so that's
Yeah.
something. And
Uh,
it did show an increase in mTOR signaling.
mhm.
Okay, study two also had about 20 participants, which is again a flaw. And this time it used real food, but liquefied. So I don't exactly know. It was like potatoes and beans in a liquid form, which sounds disgusting. And again, it did increase mTOR signaling. So
Which
that's what
is,
these. Go ahead.
but that's interesting because we know that protein digestion begins with chewing. So it's not as simple as just you know dropping liquids down your gullet and that is whatever happens. And that's why we recommend that you get the majority of your protein from real foods as opposed to opting for those protein shakes and protein beverages, even smoothies that you're fortifying with protein powders, because your body is going to process that differently because of the chewing process. And so, the fact that these studies were done, one with mice and then with humans, but 20 of them with either boost, which, by the way, when I was playing football in college, we had that was like the one perk at our school was they had boost like in the locker room constantly. Unfortunately, the graduate assistant would not always stock it the night before. So coach would come in the morning and say, "Get a boost in you," but it was always room temp. So when I saw that they were using boost, I had my own horror flashbacks because of it. But you're talking about a sweetened protein beverage and then liquefied foods. So we're already off base here.
Yeah, and so here's the conclusion of all this, right? So they had these mice studies that showed this increase in mTOR signaling, and so they decided to run these follow-on studies in humans. 2 studies, 20 humans, right? So what they've done is they've seen that increased mTOR in mice does cause a blockage in some of the blood vessels. And then they're taking these 2 small human studies and they're making a causal relationship between increased mTOR in humans and the artery blocking effect of mTOR in mice, which is just an outlandish causal. It's very correlative. It's not suggesting that what we see in mice is what occurs in humans. We're completely different creatures with completely different metabolisms, with completely different bodily functions. So it's really flawed. It requires way more research to make a claim this bold. And if you look into the studies further, you'll find that this is really not strong evidence to suggest that we have the same sorts of problems. Do you know what else increases mTOR in humans?
What, Dylan?
Strength training, right? Like
Strength training. Yeah, it's a
mTOR,
growth. Yeah,
yeah,
right.
it's a
growth hormone.
yeah, mTOR on its own is not dangerous. In
Right.
fact, acute levels of increased mTOR can be good for you. So,
I can see the headline now, Dylan, is strength training
yeah,
causes
well, it's coming.
damages
It's
arteries.
probably coming to some degree. It just starts to
Yeah.
make you wonder if they what do they really want out of this? And I believe they want our eyes on it. They want the attention because how media makes money. But tinfoil hat, you start to wonder if they just want us unhealthy and sick. But
Yeah,
we
more
have
more complicit that way.
way more. We have real world human studies, including meta-analyses. One from March of last year that shows no effects of high protein diet on cardiovascular health. And that was a meta-analysis of 221,000 human beings. No effect on heart attack or stroke. And many studies show that higher protein intake is associated with lower all-cause death rates.
Right.
So, and it's just confusing, right? Because, a year ago it was don't eat fat, and the year before that it was don't eat carbs, and this year it's don't eat protein. And pretty soon you can't eat fucking anything.
Right.
So this is just such dangerous information to be communicated in these headlines because it's just natural human instinct to read it, take it at its value, and try to figure out ways to implement it into their lives. So the context around all this is so important.
Yeah, and then another leap that they were making was, basically stating that with Americans eating higher protein levels, as they start to eat higher protein levels, that is going to have an effect on caloric intake as well. So that means that caloric intake is going to go up because protein is the most calorie dense of the food groups, or of the macronutrients. But that everything that we know about that is false, because protein is the most satiating of the macronutrients. If you are going to eat something and want to feel full after, uh, have some steak or have some carrots and eat the same amount and tell me which one fills you up more. It's just that is just nonsense to think that if we're increasing protein intake, that it's just a wild leap to make because it doesn't have any real world grounding.
It
It's
doesn't
just
account for the way that human beings eat food.
exactly
Like, yeah, it's crazy. There was a third article attacking protein, and this is the one that I saw circulating the most. It came from Vox.
Mm-hmm.
And the article was, the headline was, "You're probably eating way too much protein."
Yeah, again with the
Now,
probably. Like, it's just
again with the
ridiculous.
probably.
Like, what the hell, man?
Yeah, and people don't read the probably, right? They see way too much protein and they modify their life based on that. Now, there's
Mm-hmm.
a couple things to note here. One, the founder, owner of Vox is Ezra Klein. He's a prominent vegan and
Mm-hmm.
advocate for vegan eating. So that is underlying this whole article. But they were going on to say that Americans eat double what the government recommends,
Mm-hmm.
and that excessive protein intake is making us sick. 60% of adults are trying to get more of it into their diet, which again, we advocate for. 60%, 100% of adults, to maybe not 100, but most adults should be trying to get more protein into their diet. The government recommendation is 0.36 grams per pound of body weight. You've heard us on this podcast talk about aiming for more like 0.7 to 0.1 grams per pound of your target body weight. And to your point, the one you were just making, if you're only eating 0.36 grams per pound of body weight, where are the rest of your calories coming from?
Exactly. Carbs.
Carbs. And not that carbs are bad, but
No, but they're not going to help you build and maintain muscle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So
I mean, it's just it's ridiculous. You're talking about the building block, the only macronutrient that can build and maintain muscle in your body. Fat can't do that. Carbs can't do that. Those are for energy. That's energy sources.
Yeah.
And so without protein, you can't build new muscle. Your cells can't repair damaged muscle. And so it's shooting yourself in the foot. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, this article got by the community notes on Twitter, which I thought was pretty funny and kind of a good system for policing, so long as Twitter stays relatively moderate.
Well, that's the issue, right?
But it went on to say that muscle synthesis tops near 1 gram per pound of protein daily. That elderly people who consume optimal protein have a third the risk of falls due to sarcopenia, that animal foods are the most nutrient dense,
right,
and that the author mistakes heart disease and cancer correlation, again from those previous studies, for causation.
Which we learn in middle school, maybe even elementary school.
Correlation
is not causation. And like it's just they're making leaps because it sounds good and promotes their agenda.
Yeah, and they're referencing these government health guidelines, right? Which there's all sorts of people out there that are going to suggest that there's some, evil at play with the way that government recommends what we eat. I don't know, but
we're not that's not what we're here to. We're not here for the tinfoil hat. We're here to just talk about the facts that we can reasonably talk about.
And here's the facts. So the government recommendations haven't really changed in 40 years. You've probably seen the food pyramid. So that's just a fact, right?
Yeah. And we know the food pyramid in the way that you and I learned it is not legitimate. That should not be nobody's going to look at that and be like, that looks like a well-balanced diet.
Right. I mean, it basically just recommends that we eat bread all day. So, do with that what you will. But we have all of these studies now, again, that show increased protein intake having all of these benefits, right?
Right.
A lower risk in all-cause death. So why they wouldn't have updated that by now doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It seems there's maybe some sort of a climate change play in this, again, coming from Vox, but meat isn't exactly wrecking the planet like a lot of people want us to believe it is.
It's such low-hanging fruit, man. It's such low-hanging fruit. It's just something that people can turn to and say, like, look, I'm making a difference. I don't eat meat, without actually looking into the real cause and effects.
Yeah, and the health of the planet's really important, but what's the point of a healthy planet without healthy people on it? It's like, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Not to mention that grass-fed meats may have some carbon capture benefits.
Absolutely.
And then we got the vegan fart issue.
Well, okay, let's talk about the vegan fart issue. This is something that you're very passionate about.
Yeah, so my dad texted me a few months ago. asking about the impact of farting on the climate. And
Well, and so for those of you that have been living under a rock, that was the whole, one of the initial issues with meat and climate change is all the cows farting are what is causing the rise in greenhouse gases and climate change.
yeah, so I just started doing some research, and there was these studies showing that vegans, they fart a lot. They
Gassy,
fart 7 times
gassy ass
more
vegans.
than meat eaters. So if you're only eating plant foods, you're probably passing a lot more gas, 7 times more, according to this study. So if you want to come for the cow farts, you better look yourself in the
Yeah,
mirror.
I mean, you better be keeping that butthole awfully tight, my friend. It's just ridiculous. Who would have thought is that on your 2024 bingo card that we're coming after farting? It's ridiculous. But
So eat
yeah,
so eat your protein. All of this to say, eat your protein. These
you
studies are not causal.
please
Um,
eat your protein.
all of this is really ulterior to what is actually true, and that's that most people should be eating more protein for a number of different reasons. Whether it's to lose weight because it's more satiating, to build muscle because it's the building blocks of our muscles, to lower the risk of all-cause mortality, etc. The benefits far outweigh the risks associated with protein. So don't worry about these bullshit headlines you've seen recently.
Yeah, yeah. And then one of the last one of the last things that we noticed that they were coming for was your intermittent fasting. And so actually, you brought this one to my attention. So why don't you intro it? Intermittent fasting is now bad. We're out on it.
Yeah, we're out because it's going to cause heart disease. And
Okay.
this is a dramatic headline. 8-hour time restricted eating linked to a 91% higher risk of cardiovascular death. And I think this came from the American Heart Association.
What?
So there's a few things to note here. I'll note a few things on the study. First, I want to say we're not advocates for or against intermittent fasting.
No.
I don't think that there's all these longevity autophagy benefits that you may hear circulating in some of the longevity circles. There's a lot of human data to suggest that that's not exactly true. What it can be really useful for is just calorie restriction, right?
Right.
If you eat in a shorter window, you're typically going to eat less. Although they do find in some studies that when people consolidate their eating window, they eat like shit because they think, oh, I'm only eating in this 8-hour period, so I can eat whatever I want, which also is not true.
Yeah.
Um,
And then and also women too, just because of their hormone cycles tend to respond to time restricted eating and fasting worse than men. So that's one of those things that I have a lot of female clients, and everybody wants to lose weight. And so, this becomes one of those issues that we inevitably talk about. And my suggestion is always to, give it a shot if, you're looking for it. I tend to naturally time restrict, have a feeding window, and I definitely try to be mindful of how close to bed I'm eating. But it's not something that either of us are going to advocate for and say that this is, the way to be healthy and lose weight.
yeah, I mean, what we do know is that typically restricting calories is healthier. That carrying visceral
And it's
fat
the only way you're going to lose weight. You have to
has
be in a
also,
calorie deficit. If you're going to lose weight, you need to consume less calories than you're expending. So,
yeah,
that's one way to help with that.
and I've been reading Peter Attia's book, and he talks a lot about how like it's really this visceral fat. It's the fat around your organs that's the most damaging,
Hmm.
and that this may explain why you can be obese and not be unhealthy because certain people have different carrying capacities for fat before it turns from less damaging fat to more of this visceral fat. So you can be relatively skinny, and if your carrying capacity for fat isn't as high as somebody else, it's going to end up in places that you don't want it, which is unhealthy. So calorie restriction in general for a period of time is probably a good idea from a health standpoint. How you get there doesn't really matter. If this is what works for you, great. If not, there's other and probably better ways to do it from a lifestyle point of view and just from a a number of different kind of points of view. But on the study itself, it's worth noting these are just research highlights, so we don't have the study yet. So we really only have the headline. Hasn't even gone through peer review, could take quite a bit of time. And intermittent fasting as a health practice, right, for these longevity benefits or calorie restriction benefits, it's relatively new. It was like this new hot diet in the last, I don't know, 5 years or so. So the people they studied probably weren't doing the intermittent fasting for healthy reasons. They weren't coming at it from a point of a health practice, right? And so there's probably some confounding variables in this study as well. We'll see. There are studies that show increased BMI, as I noted, with shortened feeding windows. So there's studies that show when you whether it's 8 hours or some other sort of restriction of your feeding window, that people are prone to eat worse in that feeding window because it maybe provides some false sense of security. And there could be some reverse causality in this too, right? So people who are already more likely to get heart disease may have worse overall eating behaviors, including not eating regularly. And so there's a lot to be explored further when we see the study, but I think it's safe to say that there's probably something else going on here, that eating in an 8-hour window isn't going to increase your risk of cardiovascular death by 90+%, which is just really, it's a scary headline on its own. And then there's other studies on intermittent fasting. There's human randomized control trials, which are sort of the best of the best in different nutrition-based studies that show intermittent fasting can actually decrease risk factors for cardiovascular disease. So we'll maybe share more once the study's published and we can infer more. But yeah, it's a pretty damning headline that more needs to be known, but we can pretty safely say is pretty dramatic at this point.
Yeah, and so I guess, like, to put a bow on it, the more importantly than when you're eating is what you're eating and how much.
You bet.
And if intermittent fasting or time restricted eating, because there is nuance to to that as well. If that helps you eat well and eat less, then go for it. I doubt it's going to make you 91% at a higher risk of cardiovascular death because you're making healthier decisions because of it. Now, if you're one of those people that when you have a feeding window, you just stuff your face with whatever you can get your hands on, then perhaps, spacing it out and having, more of like the grazing philosophy is better for you. But everybody's going to be different. It's not a one size fits all situation, and that's what is so hilarious about headlines like that.
So the last one here is less about health impacts on human beings and rather about an individual who is notable for communicating the health impacts of different practices to human beings. And this is Andrew Huberman. If
Yeah.
you're following the wellness, health, fitness space at all, you've probably seen the article that came out in New Yorker magazine. Who is podcast guest turned star Andrew Huberman really? And it's a hit piece, right? Like it's kind of rough for him.
Well, for sure. So, just to summarize, well, first off, who is Andrew Huberman? If you don't know, he is a Stanford professor, really, really smart guy, and has a super informative, honestly, kind of dry, and really dense podcast about health and wellness. And he gets really into he delves into some of the biohacking topics, but really does a great job of talking about really complex health and wellness issues or topics, and gets into the weeds on them, and really really gets down deep about them. And I've found a lot of his podcasts to be really really helpful. He's got a great one on sleep that I love. He's got a bunch of really great content. But essentially, this article came out and said that he was um, dating 5 women at the same time and might not be a great guy. Um, I have never once. I don't know Andrew Huberman. I'm probably never going to meet him. And even if I do, I'm probably not going to spend enough time with him to be able to determine whether or not he is a good guy. That's not really my place. And I don't really think that it's a magazine's place. Now if you're one of these women and you feel like you've been lied to or cheated on, like that sucks. And I understand that you are upset about what happened in that situation, but it doesn't even necessarily sound like it, Dylan. In part of the article, I didn't read it too deeply, but it sounded like some of these women were actually like created like a support group together to kind of like figure out what to do in this situation. And it's one of those things where we don't need our scientists to be great guys. And that doesn't it's not meaning that he is exonerated and that he shouldn't um that he should be doing these things, but like frankly it's none of my freaking business, man. And I don't think it really is America's business either. Why do we really care what a guy that we're never going to meet or have in our lives, like why do we care if he is a good partner or not?
And it just feels like the article's trying to discredit the information he's sharing by attacking his character, which I don't love either, because whether he's a good guy or not, the information he's communicating is helping people. Um,
Yeah, and
and
that doesn't mean that we should hide. It doesn't mean that this information should be just swept under the rug and shouldn't be talked about for the people that it's important to. Like if you're considering, here's what I'll say: if you're considering getting into a serious monogamous relationship with Andrew Huberman, then watch out.
right.
But like if you're not, shut up.
Yeah, or even if you're considering being friends with him, like, but we're not, the way we consume what he has to share isn't through friendship. And I think the takeaway for me is you can still trust his information. Like he's a neuroscientist at Stanford that has decided he's going to take this really complicated information, and while it's, to your point, it's still relatively dry, I think for the masses, there's a lot of good practical takeaways in the things that he shares that's helping people.
Well,
So
and
the intent behind it
obviously,
is odd
yeah,
to
and,
me.
and obviously helping him because I think he's 48, Dylan.
Yeah,
And if he's got the energy to date five women at the same time, then clearly the cold plunges and whatever all the stuff he's promoting is having some sort of positive effect on his energy levels.
it's working, man.
I
The
get,
the
yeah.
we- the weird part of the article for me too is it starts by talking about how tough his life was growing up. Like there was a little boy, and the boy's family was happy until one day the boy's family fell apart. The boy was sent away. He foundered, he found therapy, he found science, he found exercise, and became strong.
Well,
The
they're
period after
building
the
him up.
No, it goes on further. It says the period after the separation was, he says, one of pure neglect. His father was gone. His mother totally checked out. He was forced around age 14 to endure a month of youth detention, a situation that was not jail, but harrowing in its own right. Like, okay, so he went through all this trauma in his upbringing, and he has struggles with his relationships with women. What a shock. Like uh they have some empathy maybe in some of that as well. I'm not here to suggest that it excuses what he did whatsoever, whether
No,
it's true or not, but like
but this is an
it's just
article.
odd. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
odd. It's
yeah,
odd.
it 100%. So
So
again, yeah, like Huberman might not be a guy that you want to get into a relationship with, but it doesn't change the fact that his information is still rock solid.
yeah, so if you see this article, if you read it, you don't have to like Andrew Huberman. He may have done some
No.
bad things, but don't let it discredit the value that he's bringing to the health and wellness space.
Well, and be leery, but not just about this, but just in general, when you see, people just getting attacked, in the news. Things tend to be a lot less black and white as writers and journalists will make them out to be.
So this may evolve into a bit of a segment in the podcast, yeah,
I
where
like
we,
it. I like it. This is
because
good. I
this,
mean, and there's going to be stuff we can always talk about.
yeah, this stuff is coming out constantly. I saw one the other day about some health organization was suggesting that I think it was you shouldn't eat the whole Cadbury egg at one time
Oh, I just
or
saw that. Yeah.
or something crazy. So like
Shut
some of this stuff
up.
is just insane, like
Yeah.
unreal. It's just constantly coming out, and I think to dispel some of it through the lens of just nuance, context, and how regular people, real people, should receive this information, we can add some value there. There's
Yeah.
another segment I think we kind of want to start to implement, and we mentioned it at the
Hmm.
end of the last pod,
And you guys
encouraging people,
delivered.
yeah, encouraging people to send in some questions, things that they're pondering or curious about. So we'll do a Q&A, maybe 1 to 3 questions an episode where we just answer questions you have. So keep them coming.
Yeah.
We got a
Hmm.
few in this week. How many do you want to cover today?
Well, I think we can. I think we can try to get all three.
All
Let's
right, so
let's
we got
let's
we
go
got
for it.
three here. So the first one we have is around organic food. Should you eat it? How important is it? Um, a question I've struggled with. I think
Yeah.
I've lived on both ends of the spectrum to some degree, like exclusively organic to not really caring too much about it at all. So
Hmm.
where do you stand on this?
It's hard, man, especially nowadays. Like, and I was with you where I for the longest time was an organic food snob, and like annoyingly so. Um, and because of the rising cost of food, it's really made me think, about, is this something that I need to be prioritizing, this organic food? And in some cases, yeah. But the thing that I think is important to remember is that organic label, that USDA certified organic label, is as much marketing as it is, information. And it's
Yeah.
just important to remember that because you're seeing something is certified organic in your grocery store, it doesn't inherently mean that it's healthier than the conventional thing, $2 cheaper and 5 steps down.
Yeah, so what does organic mean? Like, what does the certification label mean? It means that there were no antibiotics given to the animals. It means that it doesn't contain any pesticides or herbicides or chemical additives, and there are no artificial fertilizers used. It doesn't guarantee that it will be totally free of any of these things, but you can probably infer that the quantities of these things should be much lower than conventionally grown food and meat. Um, there are a lot of studies on organic food. They're all pretty low quality. It's a difficult thing to study. Um, none of them are anything close to causal. So again, the best data we can have to make determinations about the impacts of different things on human health is to get as close to causal as we can. And we're pretty far from that with a lot of these studies. There's some relationship shown between the pesticides and herbicides used in our food that lead to everything from increased cancer risk to infertility to disrupted gut microbiome. But a lot of these studies are in rats. So again, human beings, we're not rats. Um, and there's some epidemiological studies. Those are more observational, where they're asking people to make determinations about past behavior. So there's some flaws in that, right? Don't and they also don't account for other behaviors, right? Like people who are eating organic, are they healthier? Do they have a lower risk of cancer because they're eating organic, or because people who eat organic are more likely to have healthy behaviors around the food that they eat? So it's difficult with the way that some of these studies are run. All very far from proven. For me, I think the conclusions are anybody that's saying conclusively that eating inorganic food causes X or Y, cancer or whatever, infertility, they're wrong. There's nothing out there that is causal enough to say that for certain. It would be much more fair to say there's some preliminary research to suggest that there could be some risks to eating inorganic. And with that knowledge, you can make the decision. You can weigh the cost benefit of the purchasing decision. It is more expensive. Food is expensive. We talked about it at the front of this episode. Um, and so for me, the way that I pursue organic now is pretty much anything without a peel Um, I try to lean towards organic if and when I can afford it. The peel is a protective barrier from those pesticides and herbicides to some degree, right? So like an avocado, a banana, for example, you're not eating the peel on that, an orange. And so you peel it off and dispose of it. I'm less concerned about those things making their way to the fruit or vegetable that I'm eating. But if it's something like a berry, where I'm just rinsing it off and eating it, again, if I can afford it and they don't balloon to $9 for a tiny little carton, I try to lean organic in those situations.
Yeah, and so I have, there are two things that I look at when it comes to this topic. The first is, if something is going to cause you financial stress, if buying organic is causing you financial stress, then buy conventional. Just, wash it and do some research. The best ways to wash and store your conventional produce. So if you're sitting there, crunching numbers in the grocery store, checking your bank account, and it's causing you stress around that food, then you need to go with something that isn't going to cause that stress. I would rather have somebody eating conventional fruits and vegetables than none at all. And then leaning towards the processed foods. That's one. The other thing is I am personally am leaning more towards local versus organic. Seeing something that is a local product, seeing something that was grown in my town, in the going to a farmer's market and getting food from those local sources is a lot more important to me. Um, and I think if you can do that, that it might not be certified organic, but you're going to get your hands on some really high quality products and really high quality fruits and vegetables that way.
Yeah, you can talk to the guy who grew it and you can ask him some questions. With these big organic farms, right? Like there's nothing to suggest that they're not bordering a conventional farm.
Hmm.
And there's like this thing called weather, like wind and rain.
Ever heard
And
of it?
wind and rain can blow these different chemicals, pesticides, herbicides from field to field. There's no border or boundary that's preventing these things making their way onto other land. So I love the local tip. That's a really good one as well. And it gives you an opportunity to eat seasonally too. And there's a lot of value in variety in your diet. So a good way to get different types of fruits and vegetables into your diet is, and maybe because we're in Wisconsin, it's more vegetables, but is to get the things that are seasonal into your diet on a regular basis.
Absolutely. And you know what, Dylan, let's actually just go with one more here.
Okay.
Let's go one more question, and let's go with one that is near and dear to our hearts. It comes from one of our best friends, Sam. Tips for training when you have 3 kids and no time to prioritize working out. This is something that I am so passionate about because it doesn't need to be 3 hours at the gym a week or 5 hours or whatever the case may be. There is so much value that you can get from just doing little workouts at home, and I don't even mean anything that has to be particularly structured. The movements that are good for you: push-ups, squats, lunges. It just finding the time, even if it's just in between meetings at work, dropping down and doing some push-ups or some crunches or some air squats. Um, you know, Anything more than what you're currently doing is going to have a positive effect if you do it consistently. And so, I mean, we can go into more detail about specific ways to do that, but it's just any sort of extra movement that you can get uh, compared to what you're doing right now, as long as you do it consistently, is going to have a positive impact in the long run.
think one of the biggest problems with the portrayal of strength training culture and just exercise in general is that if you can't achieve this fantastic physique and these immediate results, that means you're unsuccessful. And that is so incredibly incorrect. There are so many benefits to small doses of exercising, whatever you can get in. Um, there's been some new research around exercise snacks where you literally just like 10 minutes whenever you have it, you drop down and you do some push-ups, you do a few air squats, right? Like just you don't have to climb the mountain immediately. If you're a dad of three and you don't have a free minute to breathe most days, um, look for those little bits of time that you do have and start taking some small steps towards better in the in the kind of ethos of our podcast, better basics. Do the basic things you can do better to improve your health and your fitness. And then you can progress from there when more time allows, right? There's a lot of different ways to do this. The way I'm doing it now is I'm breaking down what used to be, 90 minutes, 3 or 4 days a week in the gym to 20 to 30 minutes a day. And I get up a little earlier, go down in the basement, I take care of my workout. It doesn't look like what it used to, and that's okay. Now is not the phase of my life where I'm working to build a whole bunch of muscle, but I recognize the mental health, the physical health benefits that come from continuing to work out and figure out ways to fit that into my life in a way that works for me now. And
Yeah.
I think just important to view it through that context versus I need a program and I need a log and I need to make sure that I'm doing this perfectly every day, which is a place that I approached fitness from early on. It doesn't need to be that way. Start where you can, start where you are. And, as your life evolves, you'll have seasons where you're able to give more to it.
If all you're trying to do right now is survive because you have kids and you've got a job and you've got a wife and a life and you like to have fun, uh, you're not going to be able to make massive progress in the gym. What you need to focus on is just maintaining what you already have and just starting to make steps in the right direction. 90%, it takes, uh, I got to make sure that I'm saying this correctly. For muscle that you've already built, it only takes 10% of the work that it took to build it to maintain it. So if all you're trying to do is maintain, it does not take a ton of exercise. It
Mm-hmm.
just takes a little bit of consistency. So I think it's worth like talking about some just basic at-home movements that you can do.
Wait. And I also want to say before you do that, and if you're starting from zero, to build the muscle
Oh
isn't going to
yeah,
take a whole lot either, right?
new
So like,
beginnings.
yeah, if you're not working out at all, these little things that Matt's about to share, they're going to have major benefit, not only
Mhm.
for physical, for your mental health and physical health, but for building muscle. So
Yeah.
that's worth noting too.
Absolutely. So, I mean, we think about the major movement categories. So, obviously, for push, there's push-ups, and that can be anything. If you can't do a push-up on the floor right now, elevating your hands, so you're pushing on the couch or a coffee table or countertop, is a great place to start. Once you're able to do 10 reps in that particular setup, then advancing it's going to be a good way to go. uh, Air squats are going to be an awesome move for the lower body. If you are looking for something to add to your home, just a pull-up bar for a doorway is going to have a massive impact. And then every time that you walk through that doorway, you just, even if you can't do a full pull-up, jump up and then slowly lower yourself down. I promise you, if you do that every single time that you walk through that doorway, it's going to have a profound impact on your strength. But not only that, if you do have a family, if your kids see you prioritizing these movements, they're going to want to do it too. They're going to want to be like mom. They're going to want to be like dad. And so you can make it something where you get to, it's having fun with the kids too, and it can take some of the stress out of it where, oh, I need an hour away from my family to, to get into the gym, where really, if you just do some push-ups, sit-ups, squats, pull-ups, hanging from that doorway pull-up bar, you can incorporate the kids, you can make it a family event, and you can just make that something that you're all doing and getting better together.
I love that. Final piece of advice: download the Basic Home for free and just do it when you can. Like,
Right.
do it in snacks. Do it
Mhm.
whenever you have a minute. Take a 10-minute lunch break. Get up 10 minutes earlier, do a little bit of it. Right before you go to bed, do a little bit more. I think a really good goal for a dad of 3 with limited time would be try to do 10 to 20% more push-ups, squats below parallel, and pull-ups every month. Something simple like that, right? Like 20% more. If you can do 10 right now, try to get to 12 push-ups by the end of the month. And the way you do that is just frequency, right? Like when you're able to do push-ups, do them and test
track
yourself
it.
at the beginning of the month and the end of the month. Yeah, write it down. And
Track
so
it. Write it
you got
down.
10 on April 1st. If you can get to 10 by April 30th, 12 by April 30th, you've gained muscle, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, or you've just found more time to do it, and
Maybe.
and that's it too, and that's okay, because it's not about doing these major steps like you said earlier. It's not about climbing Everest in a day. It's about just taking one step forward and not taking two steps back. So anything that you can do to stay moving forward is going to help. And like Dylan said, if you are looking for an at-home program to help get you started, go on over to thebasictrainer.com, and we have a free at-home workout program, Basic Home. And if you're looking for something to take your gym experience to the next level, we also have Basic Muscle. Dylan, before we get to the final segment of the day, you got anything else that you want to add?
I just will say that Sam, who gave us that question, if he heeds the advice, I'm in danger because he's coming for my title of longest amateur driver of the golf ball in the state. Um, he's right behind me. He doesn't work out at all right now. So
Oh man, if he can just loosen up those hips a little bit, man,
yeah, dude, I'm in
he's gonna be a
trouble, man.
problem.
So yeah, we'll see. He's got a few months before we're out on the golf course. He might be out
That's
driving me.
All right. So we're going to bring it home with the I Lift a sad song of the day. Just one for you. It's my pick this week. Emotion Sickness by Said the Sky, Parachute, and Will Anderson. Check it out. You're going to love it.
Love it, man.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.